Hey, if you were ever into the band Stryper, or if you just remember them, I think you will enjoy what we have for you here today. Something that surprised me as we've done this channel, we get a lot of you that recommend, hey, you should do a video about this. Why don't you find an old newspaper article about this band or this band? It surprised me how often people have suggested we do a video on Stryper. And so it just so happens that I actually have a bunch of their albums. And so I thought, you know what, that would be kind of interesting to see if we could find an old newspaper article. And I found one that's pretty cool, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. But before that, I have a kind of a funny little story about kind of my relationship with all this stuff. And then I'm going to show you some interesting things about a couple of albums that again, I think you'll find kind of fascinating. So when I was a young guy, I started playing guitar when I was really, really young. And I had several different guitar teachers over the years. And I don't know when it was, but at one point, as I was getting into my early teens, I was starting to get into a lot of heavier music, and I bought the album Deepest Purple. And what would happen when I go to my guitar lessons is we'd go in and we'd do the little reading music thing, which I never really learned how to do. You know, we'd have the music book and I'd tink, 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 you know, try to play the songs. But the thing that was most exciting to me was at the end of every lesson, my guitar teacher would take, if I brought a tape in, he would listen to it in his little Walkman, and then he'd figure it out, and then he'd write it out on tablature. So that'd be one of the parts of the lesson, is that I could bring a song in, and then he'd figure out how to play it for me. Well, this particular teacher was a pretty hardcore Christian, just say it that way. I don't know what he was a part of or whatever. He didn't like dump it on me a lot or anything, but I just knew he was, and he would mention it every once in a while. And so one week I was so excited because I discovered this new song that was an old Deep Purple tune. I was so excited to learn. And it was the song Burn, because that's on Deepest Purple, and I'd never heard it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the coolest song I've ever heard. You know, it has this great guitar hook, you know, Richie Blackmore. So I put it on a cassette tape, and I was so excited. And I walk in, we do the normal, you know, thing where I'm reading the music, and then we get to the end of the guitar lesson. He says, okay, what'd you bring from this week? And I hand him a cassette, and I said, Burn by Deep Purple. And he just said, no. What? What? No, he says, nah, we're not going to do that one. And then he says, what about, and he just came up with some, I don't remember what it was after that, but it just shocked me. But, and the reason was he didn't want to, I don't know, expose himself or me. It's so weird looking back. I mean, I was 13, 14 years old, however old I was at the time. And today it's just funny looking back at it. And I'm kind of glad it happened, because it makes for kind of a funny story. But anyway, he just wouldn't listen to certain songs, and he wouldn't play certain songs because of this, because of his religious, because of his Christian beliefs or what have you. Anyway, I never really got that, but that was a thing. So there's more to the story though. So as I'd go to these lessons every week, every once in a while, this stuff would come up, and he'd talk about different music. And I don't remember how the conversation happened, but he said there are actually some Christian hard rock bands out there. And so he says, and he started talking about one of them called Petra, which I didn't know anything about. And then another band called the Res Band, which he got really excited about as he told me about it. So I went out and I bought this. I bought this album right here, the Resurrection Band, the best of Res, Music to Raise the Dead. And this is supposedly some sort of a hard rock band that played Christian hard rock. So I bought this album, and I was just kind of interested again, just to hear it and see what it was like. My guitar teacher seemed to like it, and yeah, why not, right? And so I went and dropped my $7.99 plus tax on this album, and I took it home, and I just didn't get it. I played a couple of tunes. I think the only one, I think it was called Military Man. That was the only one that could get my attention at all. And I don't know if any of you out there ever liked this. Tell me what to listen to. But I haven't listened to it in 100 years. I just listened to it when I got it. And like a lot of albums, I'd buy them, and I'd listen to them and I didn't get it. And then I'd sit on it for a couple months and I'd get it back out thinking, maybe I'm missing something. And I'd listen to it again and I'd, nope, I still don't like it. And this was one of those where I never got it. So then I kind of had this attitude, like any of this stuff, this Christian hard rock, I just didn't even want to give it a chance because it seemed, I don't know, silly, or just didn't seem like, it didn't seem, I don't know how to explain it, but I just kind of assumed it was going to not be good. Like it'd be B-rate music. So I never bothered with Petra, never bought anything else by the Res Band. Well, then one day, I don't remember how this happened, but a friend of mine said, hey, you've got to hear this heavy metal band that did a version of Winter Wonderland. And they're called Stryper. And I thought, what, winter, I said, so I'm always interested in something kind of goofy and strange like this. And so I don't remember if somebody played it for me first or if I bought it first, but what it is it's this 12-inch single that's called Reason for the Season. And they did the song Winter Wonderland on this album, or on, it's an EP really, because it only has a couple of songs on it. But their version of Winter Wonderland is hysterically awesome. And it's reminiscent of Ballroom Blitz. If you remember how that song starts with the drum hook, and then he comes in and he goes, "Are you ready, Steve? Andy? Mick?" Something like that. "All right, fellas, let's go." And then the song kicks in. Well, their version of Winter Wonderland is kind of like the way Sweet did their song Ballroom Blitz, because it starts out with this. I'm singing you a drum line in case you didn't notice. And as I recall, Robert Sweet's going into this double kick, and it's actually a pretty kicking drum line, like it's rocking. And then what happens is Michael Sweet, the singer, jumps in and he says, "All right, guys, we're going to do some Christmas singing." And then you hear the other guys go, "Oh man, I got a cold," this kind of silly, goofy stuff. But of course, I'm 14 or 15 or whatever. I'm like, this is kind of fun. Listen to these guys talking to each other. And then he says, "Come on, Bob, you're my brother. You got to help me out." And he goes, "I should better stick to the drums." Kind of silly. And then so Michael Sweet starts singing the tune. "Sleigh bells ring, are you listening? In the lane, snow is glistening." And then he goes, "Come on, guys, this isn't going to work." Something like that. And then you are just blown away by this amazing harmony that kicks in. And it is just like almost choir, barbershop quartet-like in its perfection. They just nail it. And because it's a beautiful side, we're happy tonight, walking in and man, it's crazy amazing, these vocals that are on that tune. And then it just goes into this heavy, heavy version of Winter Wonderland. And I'm sitting there listening to this going, dude, this is so cool. I mean, it was one of those, see if you can relate to this. It was one of those rare moments where you hear a song, some heavy metal hard rock tune that you want your parents to hear. Because you're always, I don't know if you had things like this. I remember listening to Billy Corgan talking about this when he was talking about Rush. And he said how much he wanted his dad to just sit down and listen to it so he could kind of get it. Hang on just a second, this will be really quick. With hundreds of videos on our channel now, we've made playlists to make it easy for you to find whatever the thing is that you're interested in. We have a playlist with all of our Rush videos, Kiss, Led Zeppelin, Van Halen. We have categories like 80s metal and even our popular magazine flip-throughs, where we go through page by page with Circus Magazine, Hit Parader, and others, all in 4K resolution. You'll find it all organized and ready to explore. Just click the playlist tab on our channel's homepage. All right, back to the video. And this was one of those songs where you get kind of excited, like, Mom, you got to come hear this, because you think there's this thing that somehow you're going to be able to connect with something, And anyway, so they have this tune and it's great. I mean, it's great. They nail it. It's so fun. It's so cool. And then this EP has this other tune on there called Reason for the Season, and it's good. It's actually a really good song. And so this is my first experience with this band, and they're a Christian band. When I was already like not interested in these Christian bands because I'd had this bad experience before, and then I listen to this and I'm into heavy metal anyway, and I go, that's actually kind of cool. And and just real quick, in case you don't know much about them, the band is called Stryper, and they always put this Isaiah 53:5. And if you don't know what that is, I'll just kind of explain what's going on here. In the book of Isaiah, which is in the Old Testament, there's a lot of people that believe that this part of the Bible it's a prophecy about Jesus. That's the idea. And so what it says, and it's hard to understand why they call it this name unless you understand what that verse says. And so I'm just going to read it to you. And you have to hear the King James Version because it doesn't have the right word in some of the other versions. So what it says in this verse is, "But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, the chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed." And in the other translations, the reason this is important is that it uses the word wounds. Well, what a lot of Christians will teach is that this verse is the stripes are the wounds, like when he was whipped, when Jesus was whipped and it left the stripes on his back. I mean, that's kind of the idea. Do with that whatever you want to, but that's kind of the interpretation. And so then what these guys did, they were actually, their band was called Roxx Regime, Roxx Regime. And when they started moving off into this idea of having this Christian music, they changed the name to refer back to that verse in the Old Testament, and they wanted to use the word stripes, so they called themselves Stryper, but they put the Y in there so people wouldn't think that they were saying stripper. Anyway, so that's how they ended up getting that name. Now, what I just always kind of liked these novelty things. There was something about me that when I'd buy an album, I would always end up liking the weird song, not the song everybody else liked. A lot of times, not always, but there were these, the song that I'd get into would be the one that was kind of the oddball. Because it would be interesting. And Stryper was kind of that way for me, where I liked them. I didn't love the music ultimately as much as I loved kind of the just interesting part of what they were doing. It was just kind of interesting to me. Man, somebody pointed out a couple days ago how often I say the word interesting on these videos. And I started watching back going, oh my gosh, that must drive people crazy when they're watching these things. So I'm attempting to watch myself and try to come up with other adjectives that will fit so that I won't drive you people crazy while I'm doing these videos. So maybe we'll have a count one of these days and see if we can control my use of that word. Years ago, there was a guy that even made that comment in a conversation. He goes, when Robert's not paying attention to you because he keeps saying interesting. So anyway, that's my default word somehow, and it got stuck a long, long time ago. Anyway, so just flipping this over. Oh, so here's the band. And the band, these two guys are brothers. In case you didn't know this stuff, I make these videos the only person that watches every one of these videos is my mom. So I will often go into things that everybody knows just because she won't. There you go. So for all of you that don't know all the finer details, I will usually go into them for that purpose. So that's Robert Sweet, and this is Michael Sweet, and these two guys are brothers. He's the singer, and he plays guitar, and then he's the drummer. And I'm not maybe a great judge of drummers, but he's pretty kicking. He's a really good drummer. This guy's name is Oz Fox. He's the lead guitar player, and this guy's name is Timothy Gaines, and he was the bass player during this phase of the band. And one of the things that I really liked about these guys was that Michael Sweet, to me, sounded like Dennis DeYoung. And at that period, I was actually really into Styx as well. And as specifically The Grand Illusion, loved that. There were a few tunes on there that I really, really loved, especially like Come Sail Away. And when you listen to Dennis DeYoung, I was just loved his voice back then. And then when you hear Michael Sweet, you go, man, he sounds a lot like Dennis DeYoung. And I love Dennis DeYoung. So I had this EP, and then you look on the back, and they have these two different versions of this song, Reason for the Season. There's Winter Wonderland. And then you see they have another record, which I will talk about in a second after I show you something interesting. So one of the things, if you're a vinyl collector, you will know about this stuff. But if you're not, you may not have seen these things before. And I always wondered why more bands didn't do this. And it's going to be, if you can't see it in this camera right here, I will do a close-up picture. So there's the front side of the album, but they did something where they did one of these where they just have this is the Enigma label. This is the record company that they were signed to. A couple other bands had signed to them, like Rat. If you look at their EP, there's a little thing that says Enigma down in the corner. So Stryper was just really, for all intents and purposes, just another band out of LA that had been kind of in the mix. They changed what they were doing to this Christian metal, and then all of a sudden people started paying attention to them. So whether it was a gimmick or whatever, leave that to you to decide. I don't, whatever, as far as I'm concerned. My big thing is, was the music any good? And so one of the things that they did that I'm surprised more bands didn't do was this etching. And if you can't, right here, there is the etching, and it's hard for me to see it right here. It's Jesus Christ is the reason for the season, God's gift to the world. They etch it into the vinyl right there. And if you can't see it, I'll do a close-up right now with another camera and then put that in the edit. And it surprised me again that a lot more people didn't do this, because every once in a while you'd find an album that they would have some sort of weird thing that somebody would just etch into the vinyl when it went to press or whatever you call it. When they would go to press the album, somebody with the master, they just etch it in here. And then that would end up in all the records that were produced then afterwards. A notorious one that you may know about is in the album Pyromania by Def Leppard. On side A, in this area right here, it says, "If you're gonna be a bear." And then you flip it over to side B and it says, "Be a grizzly." And sometimes you see things like people put a little smiley face or whatever. Well, so anyway, that was kind of an interesting thing. They etched that all the way around the edge. And if I do show a close-up, it's probably going to show all the dust and nastiness, which close-ups often do. So you can see it's not too bad, but up close you can kind of often see those things. But that's kind of a cool thing that they did with this record, just that little etching. And the other thing that I know that I noticed about this, because they all will always put the catalog number down here in the vinyl as well. And I don't know that this is probably too much of a coincidence to have been an accident, because again, Enigma was a small record label, so they probably could have done this on purpose just for the fun of it. But this is also etched in the vinyl there, but it's easier to look at here. The catalog number is 10777. And if you look at Robert Sweet's clothes, the drummer, you'll see that he has 777. And the idea with that was, if you hadn't figured that out already, if you didn't know, is that because 666 is the number of the beast, then 777 must be good, right? So they would use that, and you'd see that kind of in all their stuff. But then, of course, they're in the middle of Los Angeles heavy metal. They had that sound, and then because they were called Stryper, they kind of emphasized the stripes. And if you ever saw them in concert, which I did probably 4 times, I actually saw them several times, they would have all over everything, not just their clothes. It was everywhere. The black and yellow stripes were on everything. The drum set was covered with them. The amps were covered with it. And it was kind of a fun novelty thing about this band, that not only did they have the part about the music or the lyrics, but then they had this look that was just different than everybody else. They'd found some angle with that, which was, it was kind of cool. I was going to say interesting, and it was that, but I don't want to say that word. So then I saw they had these other albums. So then I went and bought, of course, this, which is let me move this one out of the way. And I have something to show you in here too. So then they put out this, which is kind of an album, but but I actually think this came out before that, because that was obviously on the back of that album. But for me, this was number 2. I went to the record store and I thought, well, I really like that Reason for the Season and I like that Winter Wonderland. I'm going to go buy one of their records and see if this stuff is any good. So I went and bought this, and then they continue on with the theme. And if you've never looked at this before, you can see what they have here. There's that 777, and then they have the initials for all the guys in the band. There's Oz Fox, 777 again, Timothy Gaines, Robert Sweet, Michael Sweet, and then you have, I guess this is the Finger of God or something. They're Going to the Earth, which is yellow and black stripes, and then they called this the Yellow and Black Attack, and that kind of became their thing over the years, that they called themselves the Yellow and Black Attack. And I don't know, it's kind of a fun thing, I guess, as far as album covers are concerned. And then you flip it over, and then there's the guys looking kind of angelic. And then again, there's Robert Sweet, Michael Sweet, Timothy Gaines, Oz Fox. Now, one of the things that I said earlier, and there's the Isaiah 53:5, by his stripes we are healed, just in case you were wondering, where that word came from if you were just buying this record. And one of the things you'll notice about them, because setting aside the whole religious stuff and whatever that became kind of a novelty and got people's attention, they were a good band. And it was pretty fascinating listening to what they would do with the double guitars, because I don't know, I think they were as good as anybody with the dual harmonies on the guitars. They did some pretty complicated stuff. And if you go back and listen to some of these tunes, the Winter Wonderland, the whole middle of that tune, they have this guitar solo and they're doing these harmonized guitars. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think it might be on the song Loud and Clear. They go into some really ripping guitar solos where they're playing harmonies on top of each other, and it's really cool. I mean, they nail it. So you have this really killer singer in Michael Sweet, and he doesn't just sound like Dennis DeYoung, but he knows how to kind of do the heavy metal thing with it, so he was a great singer. And then you have this pretty hot band. I mean, Robert was a killer when you'd see him live too, as I recall, he had this kind of cage around him and his cymbals were hanging from chains. It was pretty neat. Like I said, it was a fun show and they were interesting the way they would present themselves. And these two guys together, when they were both playing the guitar, they were both good guitar players. And they would do these kind of intricate, cool guitar harmonies when they were playing together. Now, for me, the problem was I just didn't love the music. It was good. It was okay, but I wasn't just dying to listen to it. But it was cool enough that, and I liked the idea enough and the gimmickry and all that other stuff that I just kind of got into it a little bit and bought their stuff just because. And so, but it was funny when I knew that I was going to do this a couple of days ago, that I was going to talk about this sometime soon. I went back and I listened to this whole album, and I also listened to the EP, which the other thing I showed you a second ago, which I still like both those songs. But I listened to this whole thing and I walked away kind of the same way I did when I was a younger guy, with a little bit of, it's okay, it's cool. I mean, it fit into the LA scene at the time. They were doing what a lot of bands were doing. It's just that they found a way. Again, I'll leave the sincerity of it up to you. I'm not here to make any commentary on that because I don't really care. To me, ultimately, it comes down to, is the music any good? And it was okay. And it fit well with the other stuff that was coming out at the time. But there was nothing where you walk away and go, dude, that's killer. But they were a killer band. They knew how to play. They had some great stuff in the execution of the music. So you got to give them that. Now, I'm going to show you one other thing on the inside that I think you'll find fun. See, there's a different word. That's not interesting. All right. So similarly to the other album, they're on Enigma here too, and they do the same thing where they have the side 1, side 2. And then on the back, they do an etching in here, and it says, and actually it's on both sides, it says, by his stripes we are healed. That's etched in. And again, if you can't see it in this camera, I'll get a close up so you can see all the dust, but you'll also be able to see the etching. And on the front side, which I just blew right past, it says right there, Isaiah 53:5, Stryper, right there. I don't know, why is it that more bands didn't do that? It's kind of it seems like it's such an easy thing to add some fun to an album. And for people that love collecting records, that's kind of a fun thing to look for. It's a little bit like staying at a movie to the end of the credits to see if there's an extra scene. It's one of those kind of things where you just go, you get this little kind of fun bonus thing with a record that you buy. So anyway, these are what I'm showing you right now. These are the records that I bought back in high school. Still have them. And the next album that came out, they had another one, I think that was called Soldiers Under Command. And that one was better. And it had a couple of songs on there that I genuinely thought were catchy and pretty cool. And I bought it. I think I saw them on that tour. I don't remember. I just saw them a few times because even though they were a Christian band, they mingled amongst the other stuff. Because as I recall, I mean, they were touring, opening up for a lot of these other just bands. It just so happened they were this different approach. And then they had the one after that, which I think was their biggest seller, which was called To Hell with the Devil, and I have that one too. And if I'm not mistaken, that was their biggest selling one. I don't know I don't think many of these ever went platinum. I think that one might have, but anyway, that was kind of the one that really, really put them on the map. And maybe we'll do a thing on those other two records at some point, since so many people had asked for this, to talk about them. But those are the kind of fascinating things about this. Now, what I found, and this is one of the things we do a lot on this channel, if you're new to the channel and haven't spent a lot of time here, part of the fun of what we do here is we do this kind of historic rewind. And we go back and look at what was being said at the time, specifically in like newspaper publications. And sometimes we do it with, Circus Magazine, Hit Parader, and others. But I particularly find the newspapers fascinating because they're coming at it from an angle of somebody that doesn't really know much about it, and they're kind of writing to an audience that also doesn't. So the way they explain these things, sometimes they'll go into weirder details. And anyway, so I find these things fascinating. So I just found one article. I'm just going to share this with you real quick. This is from the Oregonian on Wednesday, April 17th, 1985. And the headline of this article says, Stryper, Shining Stars of Heavy Metal. And then there's a picture of the guys, same picture we looked at just a minute ago. Number one with a Bible ought to be the Billboard magazine chart listing for Christian rock, a style of music racing across the heavens with increasing speed. While Christian singers like Amy Grant are crossing over into secular pop market easily, the headbangers who play heavy metal and the less bombastic hard rock bands preaching the word of God are plying the Christian venues, it should say playing the Christian venues with music usually associated with more negative aspects of rock, but with quite different lyrics. Now, there's something I think that's important to note when you start talking about a band like this. The whole idea of having Christian lyrics or Christian songs was not really new. I mean, you go back to Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley had his Christian songs that he do. Johnny Cash did it. And so, and there were just a lot of people over the years that had they wouldn't dedicate the band to it, but it wasn't unusual to have people that would put those themes overtly, I mean, singing hymns even, as part of their repertoire. And they put out albums of those things. So it wasn't really, really that unusual. What was unusual was to have a heavy metal band in the middle of the LA scene having these overt Christian themes put in their music. But the point was the idea of having Christian songs, Christian themes, Christian focus in your music wasn't new. The overt, sticking it in the world of heavy metal was, and that threw a lot of people off big time when that happened. And you had these other bands like Petra and the Res Band that kind of that were kind of pushing into that, but I don't think, I mean, my reading on it and the listening that I did, it just wasn't that great. The music wasn't. And again, maybe I'm missing something and I'm just clueless, and I'd love to have you tell me what to listen to. But it just, and similarly with this first album here, it was kind of, from my ears, kind of B-level music. Okay. But the point was, what was new here was more the presentation style that really threw people off, like a heavy metal band. And then ever since then, I mean, it's gone so, you see metal, Christian stuff in every crazy style of heavy, it's just, it's all over the place now. But this was a real novelty at the time. And that was really, really what helped put him on the map, was that the novelty of the whole thing. So, because it got people paying attention. Like I said, sincerity or not, even a guy like me that's into heavy metal, you're into the LA music, and you just kind of become interested in it just because. Okay, if the secular metal message is rowdy, the Christian metal mongers challenge it with positive reactions. One group, Stryper, even tosses Bibles into its audience. By the way, I caught one of those once. I caught one, and it's somewhere in storage somewhere. If I find it, I'll have to show it to you, because it was really nothing more, as I recall, than a copy of the New Testament with their sticker on it, But they would throw these things out in the audience. Just, again, kind of a funny novelty thing. Let's see here. Stryper is rapidly becoming the stars of heavy metal. That shouldn't be too difficult yet, since few bands are preaching to headbangers. Stryper has been interviewed in magazines from Rolling Stone to Time to most major newspapers in recent months. What makes this one-time secular metal band star material is more than just a gimmick. The four-piece band is gimmicky, of course, since the visual effect is what makes metal attractive anyway. That's only partly true, but it definitely did make a difference. Stryper, its name comes from Isaiah 53:5, by his stripes we are healed. We already talked about that. Has the derriere spandex done in wild black and yellow stripes, and the hair is long and styled with makeup finishing the touch. And exactly, they had that. I mean, again, look at that picture. If you didn't know who they were, you'd go, yep, 80s glam metal, straight out of Los Angeles. They had that look. But the secret is in their rebellion against the dictum that rock is Satan's music, a thesis pounded by Bible thumpers into the heads of impressionable youth for years. This behavior seems to have passed, as some of those not so impressionable young have grown up with the sounds of rock in their ears. They must have questioned the theory that loud music sends the soul into Satan's arms. And that is, we were talking about that on the show not long ago. That really is the case, because even today, so many of the people that are, in leadership positions today, probably government officials and whatever, were fans of Iron Maiden when they were kids. And now, the adults back then who had been listening to probably Chuck Berry in their youth, or even something more, then they couldn't understand the heavy metal. They couldn't understand Iron Maiden and all this. And then now those kids are all grown up like us. And then we don't have the same kind of, it doesn't have that same kind of a negative thing that happens with that older generation, now that we're the older ones, and now this is all just kind of normal to us. All right, hard rock Christian style is selling more records every year, albeit on Christian labels, but Stryper for one and Petra for another are moving out of the tent and into the mainstream. If not lyrically, at least in a promotional sense. Stryper's label is Enigma, which was the starting gate for metal bands like Motley Crue and Rat. And Petra, in the business of selling Jesus Christ via music, recently signed a distribution agreement with A&M Records, one of the biggest secular labels. And that is kind of what made these things different, because if you go back to the Res Band, they were not on a normal mainstream. What were they on? They were on what Light Records, I guess. So that was one of the things that made this different, is that these guys were getting involved with a mainstream record company. I mean, this record company had kicked off, like they said, Rat and others out of that metal LA metal scene. So they were just kind of part of that group. Okay, so Stryper is decent metal on record, and reviews of it its shows by secular critics have some fun at the band's expense, but begrudgingly admit there's nothing soft-headed about the sound. Its LP, the Yellow and Black Attack, which is the one that we're looking at here, shows space-type missiles headed for a striped Earth, each bearing the 777 code. For Christians, they use 666 to identify the devil, with a godlike hand with one finger in the middle pointing to. An EP with the booming Reason for the Season in 2 versions also has Winter Wonderland. That's the thing that we talked about earlier, the classic holiday song done up in metal, sort of like Jimi Hendrix playing the national anthem with a little less crunch. If Stryper is the new preacher in town, the band formed in 1983 after a secular metal band failed miserably, and that was the band, like we talked about, the Roxx Regime, just did not go anywhere. So then they changed this to this. The kindly old gent with the turned-around collar is Petra, at it for nearly 15 years. The name is taken from the Greek meaning rock. So now they're going to talk a little bit about Petra. A nice touch in a band name and a sense of religious too. The group has taken literally the biblical phrase, upon this rock I'll build my church. I'm sure a lot of people watching this understand that. Petra has made its pop rock a ministry of its own. The sound is rock without the punch of Stryper, but with the strong melodic and lyrical approach of a Journey or a Foreigner. Let's see here. Oh, this is interesting. One of Petra's biggest songs on the new album, Beat the System, is God Gave Rock and Roll to You. So the band Petra did that old song, God Gave Rock and Roll to You, which a lot of us know the song from Kiss, doing it in the Bill and Ted movie, God Gave Rock and Roll to You, gave rock and roll, which was the last time we saw Eric Carr in a music video, although I don't think he played on the song, but that was before he passed away. He wanted to be in that video. Anyway, that's an old Argent song, but it had been redone a couple of times, and one of the times it had been redone was with Petra. Let's see here. And I've heard their version of it, and it's okay. You know, it's kind of cool. Let's see here. God Gave Rock and Roll to You. Greg X. Vols, the band's lead singer, told an interviewer that it's ridiculous to give the devil credit for rock and roll. Sure, the devil has perverted rock music, but it's not the beat or style that determines the music is good or evil. It's the spirit and attitude behind it. This band looks as much like its secular counterparts in rock as Stryper does. The band plays well, uses all the stage production it needs, and is said to outsell all the other Christian groups. Both of these bands will be in Portland soon. Stryper plays at 8 p.m. Friday at Benson High Auditorium, and then it mentions Petra right there. So, a couple questions for you. Did you ever see them in concert, and what did you think about it? Because in my estimation, and again, so much of when I talk on this stuff is memories that are 40 years old now, but they were good. They put on a good performance. It was entertaining. They were a tight rock and roll outfit. Those guys knew how to play, and they were good when they played together. When I look at this album in particular, and again, I'd love to get your feedback. If you have this, it was okay. It fit with the mold. It kind of had the heavy metal thing from that era, but there was nothing on here that really caught my attention. On the other hand, this EP, I really liked this. I thought that song Reason for the Season was actually good. And the Winter Wonderland, of course, was hilariously awesome and fun, and I still like listening to it. But again, the playing is undeniably good on both of these things. And especially if you're a guitar player and you want to hear a couple of dudes doing some really cool guitar harmonies, they do it. And they're, in my opinion, as good as anybody. And Oz Fox is he's a really ripping guitar player. He's very, very talented. Robert Sweet, I've never really had a discussion with drummers about him, but my estimation, just listening to him play, watching him in concert, he's actually pretty good, pretty solid drummer. And of course, Michael Sweet, fantastic singer, excellent, just cool voice. And then I don't know what to say about Timothy Gaines. He was a bass player that played well and made this unit tight. And there you go, which is one, that rhythm section is so important if you're going to have a tight band, and they were able to pull it off here. So anyway, I hope you enjoy that stuff. I find those things kind of fascinating, little etching in the vinyl, and just kind of these unique bands that had these twists that they would do. And so I'd love to get your feedback on them. Did you like these guys? What did you think about this stuff? Did you see them in concert? Please leave your comments, like the video. If you're not following the channel already, please follow the channel. And also, if you're interested in stuff like this, you probably know other people that are too. And so I just encourage you to go down and hit that share button, copy that URL, paste it in your Facebook, message it to people, send it to your friends and other people, because you probably know somebody else who'd be interested in this. And we really appreciate you sharing this, because that's how these channels and things like this are able to grow. And then we can continue to kind of expand this cool fraternity that we have going on in this channel right now. Hey, and with that, have yourself a fantastic day.